Hello everyone, welcome to the week 12 and the final TA session of Structure Analysis 1 taught by Professor Amit Shah. I am Trisha Chakraborty, one of the post teaching assistants. I am a PhD student at the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. I'll start with a brief recap of the previous weeks. Uh, the first 6 weeks was about phase one, which is analysis of determinate structures. In the first week, we first looked at the types of internal forces in structure analysis. They are bending moment, shear force, torsional moment, and axial force. Torsional moment and axial force are oriented along the length of a member, and shear force and bending moment are transverse to the length of a member. Then the common classification of elements like beams, frames, and truss elements, which are like the classification is done based on the kind of force we expect to be developed in the members, and boundary conditions like fixed support, roller support, hinge support, which restrains certain displacements or rotational freedoms. And then structural indeterminacy, the concept that we are starting with determinate structures, but we need to know the concept of what is it indeterminacy to know that this is an to determine this is a determinate structure, this is an indeterminate structure. Determinate structures basically do not have redundancy. They, if any one aspect of it fails, like one member or one boundary condition fails, the structure will collapse. They are determinate structures, but they are the easiest to solve because they do not need any additional material or geometric properties. They can be simply solved using the loading conditions and the boundary conditions. Then the bending moment and shear force diagram, BMD and SFT, how to draw them. So for a beam basically, when in a beam is a structural element that only has undergoes transverse force, so that gives rise to shear force and bending moment. So we want to study how the shear force and bending moment varies along the length of the beam, and that is what we draw in the diagram. The magnitude of shear force or bending moment is the ordinate, and the abscissa is the varies along the length of the beam from 0 to L. Then week two, we moved on to trusses in specific. So idealization of trusses, because trusses are a real world structure and they can be idealized in a 2D plane. So we saw how to idealize a real truss, but in questions you will be given the idealized truss. You won't be asked to idealize it, but it's just a concept. And stability of trusses, which is not entirely to do with determinacy. There are also some additional criteria that has to be satisfied by a truss for it to be stable. And solving the member forces in a truss. A truss is a two-force member. All the nodes are pin joints, and every member can only undergo tension or compression. So basically, axial force. So my unknowns, my force or stress-related unknowns in a truss are the member forces in each with along with sign. We generally call tension as positive force and compression as negative force. And if we have the member force in a truss, we can divide it by the cross-sectional area to get the stress. And there were two methods, method of joints and method of sections. In method of joints, we go from node to node. At each node, we have two equations, sigma fi equal to 0 and sigma fx equal to 0. So we have to choose such a joint where there are only two unknowns, and then we will move on to the next joints. This method is useful for finding out the member forces if you want to find out the member forces in the entire truss. And method of sections, we cut sections with generally through three members, and then we take the equilibrium, the overall equilibrium of the left half or the right half. And this is useful mostly in competitive exams and all when you have MCQ questions. So you are asked to find out the member force in only one or two members. Then week 3, week 4, and week 5, we looked at the displacement or the strain responses in a truss. So in a truss, there is a principle of virtual work generally in mechanics. From that, we get the unit load method, which is used to determine the displacements in a truss, the nodal displacement in x direction and y direction. In week 4 and week 5, it was about beams. So deflection of beams. In trusses, we are concerned only about the nodal displacement in two direction, two perpendicular direction and each node. And in beams, we want to find out a deflection profile along the length of the beam. So the deflection curve or the elastic curve will be the x-axis varies from 0 to L, and the y-axis is the amount of deflection. The elastic curve method works directly from the differential equation. The differential equation of a governing differential equation of a beam is d2y dx square into ei is m of x, which is the bending moment. So by integrating that equation twice, we can get y as a function of x. That is the elastic curve, and so that from that we get y. So we get the deflection at each x, where x is varying from along the length of the beam. And the moment area method and conjugate beam method are shortcut methods, which are used to which are arranged in such a way that we can get the answer in a more simplified manner, but it needs practice to be applied.
did it here. Score 200, win the game. That's been the pattern so far. Yes, I feel the wicket has been playing tremendously well for the last couple of matches, and also the dew comes in, but the outfield
Just
doesn't
give
skip
me a
through.
minute.
So, and it has helped us in the last few games. If you see, both the teams who have batted first, they've won the match. Changes for you? That's a tough question because bat first, I usually don't remember. I'll tell you later. Don't worry, we'll get that anyway. As long as Ajinkya knows. Anything you want to tick off? You're sort of midway in the table at the moment. Yes, we need to up our game in the field, especially take as many catches as possible because that kind of changes the momentum towards us. And yeah, just keep an eye on the ball while fielding and create some sort of brilliance. One thing you don't have to worry about is your power play batting, so hopefully that'll go well. Thank you so much. Right, Ajinkya Rahane, the captain of the Kolkata Knight Riders. You're happy to bowl first? Yes, we were looking to bowl first on this wicket. That's interesting because he wanted to bat first. So far, the history suggests you bat first and win. See, as long as, I mean, for me, it's all about no. Toss is a thing which you cannot control. As a team, it's all about no starting well. Whether you bat first or bowl first. For us, I think we have a batting who can chase down the target. But again, for us, it's all about starting well with the ball and then whatever the target is, we look to chase down. Vic, have you made any changes to your side? Just one change. On the Nokia comes in place of Moin Ali. And in the past, he's done really well in the middle overs. Is that what you're expecting of him?
Week 6 is an isolated topic. It was in about influence line diagrams, where an influence line diagram is constructed in the same way as the beam along the length of the beam, but unlike in bending moment and shear force diagram, the loads are fixed. The loading pattern is fixed, and we want to find out the bending moment or the shear force at every section of the beam. While in influence line diagram, the section and the reaction or load that we want to see, for example shear force at the midpoint, that is fixed, and the load is a unit load or a unit moment moves along the length of the beam. So that is how the when influence line diagram is constructed. The Muller-Breslau principle gives us the ILD in qualitative form, but we also know how to find it quantitatively. So once we have that, we can find out absolute maximum bending moment and shear force under various patterns of loading, point load, series of point loads, uniformly distributed loads, greater than or lesser than the span, and any kind, using the principle of linear superposition. Phase 2, the last 6 weeks are about analysis of indeterminate structure. That some of the topics, the basic topics are review of degree of structural indeterminacy and also kinematic like it includes static and kinematic indeterminacy, introduction to force and displacement methods. Force and displacement methods, Maxwell-Betty's reciprocal theorem, method of consistent deformation, which is a force method that is applied to beams, trusses, and frames in weeks 7, 8, and 9. Degree of kinematic indeterminacy and the displacement methods. Week 7 was about method of consistent deformations applied to beams. Week 8 was method of consistent deformation applied to trusses, and week 9 is method of consistent deformation applied to frames. Week These are the force methods, these 3 weeks, and then week 10 we looked at slope deflection method. Week 11 moment distribution method, and today we are going to look at stiffness matrix method. All these three are displacement methods. So displacement methods and force method, we'll see how they broadly vary from each other. So now structural indeterminacy, this is a review. Structures that cannot be analyzed using statics or equations of equilibrium only are called indeterminate structures. They require other material properties to be solved. The degree of indeterminacy is the number of unknown reactions minus the number of equations of equilibrium. External indeterminacy is the total number of independent support reactions minus total number of available equations of static equilibrium. Internal indeterminacy is total number of internal reactions minus available equations of equilibrium. And total degree of structural indeterminacy is the summation of these two. There are some examples. This is a cantilever beam. It has two support reactions. One for horizontal ry, that is force in reaction force in the vertical direction, and mz, which is into the plane or out of the plane moment, and there are two equations of equilibrium available. Since this is a beam, the x direction force is irrelevant, so the two two equations are sigma fy equal to 0 and sigma mz equal to 0. So this is a determinate structure since there are two unknowns and two equations. In a propped cantilever, there is one additional reaction RC. So there is one extra unknown, three unknowns, and two equations. So this is 1 degree indeterminate. This is a frame with two fixed supports. Now in a frame, all three equations are relevant. So sigma sigma fy equal to 0, sigma fx equal to 0, and sigma mz equal to 0. And there are three support reactions from this fixed support, three support reactions from this fixed support. So 3 plus 3 minus 3, that is the degree of indeterminacy is 3. Here there are two support reactions at this hinge, two support reactions at this hinge, and three equations of equilibrium. So 4 minus 1 is the 4 minus 3, 1 is the degree of structural indeterminacy. Force or compatibility or flexibility methods. There are the two classes of methods for solving indeterminate structures. In force methods, the redundant forces are chosen as unknowns, and additional equations are obtained by considering the geometric conditions imposed on the deformation of the structure. These are called compatibility conditions, which basically ensure continuity in a structure. There are some methods are method of consistent deformation, which we have looked at, virtual work or unit load method, strain energy method, method of minimum potential energy, flexibility matrix method, and displacement or equilibrium or stiffness method. So each of these terms are complements: force and displacement, compatibility and equilibrium, flexibility and stiffness. And displacements of joints are taken as unknowns, and equilibrium equations are expressed in terms of these displacements and internal loads. These equations are solved to give the actual joint displacements from which redundant forces can be calculated. The three methods are slope deflection, moment distribution, and stiffness matrix method. All three are very important, especially the first two, which we have looked at in the previous 2 weeks. Stiffness matrix method that we'll look at today is mostly a computer based, like it's an algorithmic method that is used for computer coding, and by hand we cannot really solve it much, but still we need to know the principle so that whatever software we are using, we should know what is going on in the background of it. The broad differences between the two methods are: for force method, unknowns are taken as internal member forces or reactions. For displacement method, the unknowns are taken as joint displacements. For force method, to find unknowns, compatibility conditions are written. Number of equations needed is degree of static indeterminacy. And in displacement methods, to find unknown, joint equilibrium conditions are written. So the number of equations needed is equal to degree of kinematic indeterminacy. Now, if I have a choice of using these, like between these two methods, I prefer to solve a problem with lesser number of unknowns. So if degree of static indeterminacy is lesser, I'm going to choose force methods, and if degree of kinematic indeterminacy is lesser, I'm going to choose displacement methods. Kinematic indeterminacy is basically, it has to do with the degrees of freedom, the free to move aspects of a structure. So, degree of kinematic indeterminacy refers to the total number of independent available degrees of freedom at all joints. The degree of kinematic indeterminacy may be defined as the total number of unrestrained displacement components at all joints overall. So, every joint that in a 2D truss has 2 degrees of freedom, translational in x direction, translational in y direction, or more generically along any two mutually perpendicular directions. In 3D truss, it's in a space, so it has 3 degrees of freedom, like three translational del x, y, and z. They are in three mutually perpendicular directions. This is not valid in 2D truss because it's in a plane, right? In a plane, this z translation does not exist. For 2D rigid joint, which is basically a joint in a beam or a frame, we also have 3 degrees of freedom, but they are translation in x direction, translation in y direction, and rotation in z direction. In truss, rotation is not relevant. In a 3D rigid joint, there are 6 degrees of freedom, 3 translational and 3 rotational. So the degree of kinematic indeterminacy for two plane truss is 2j minus Re, where j is the number of joints and Re is the number of support reactions. We will consider each support reaction separately, like Rx, Ry. We are going to consider them all separately. We're going to add up and get Re total, the number of unknowns, basically unknown support reactions. In a space truss or 3D truss, decay is 3j minus Re. In rigid jointed plane frame, decay is 3j minus Re again, because at every joint there are 3 degrees of freedom, but these three and these three do not imply the same things, as we can see here. And rigid jointed space frame, decay is 6j minus Re. There are some special cases. If there are if one member is actually rigid in a rigid frame, then I have to subtract the number of rigid members from my decay, so m dash m double dash. There's another special case here, that in rigid jointed frames some of the joints may be hybrid, like internal hinges, so additional degree of freedom will be available. So this term we have to add, this RR term. RR is sigma m dash minus 1 for 2D plane, if m dash is the number of members meeting at the hybrid joint. And in the 3D space, RR will be sigma 3 into m dash minus 1, when again m dash is the number of members meeting at the hybrid point. And this RR term we have to add. So the overall equation becomes the number of actually rigid members I subtract, and this term I add. This is an example. Determine the degree of kinematic indeterminacy. So uh, if the beam is actually flexible, J is 2, Re is 3, decay is 3j minus Re, 3 into 2 minus 3, that is 3. And if AB is actually rigid, I have to subtract 1 from here, m dash, so it becomes m double dash, so it becomes 2. But in this problem, whether it is C, since this hinge restricts x direction and y direction movement. This hinge also restricts x direction and y direction movement. So whether this beam is rigid or not, it doesn't matter, because x direction movement is anyway restrained in the entire member. So whether it's actually rigid or actually flexible, my decay is. So decay is 3j minus Re, 3 into 2 minus 4, so that's 2. This is rotation at A and rotation at B. And even if it is actually rigid, it doesn't matter, decay remains 2. This is another example where the number of joints is 3, Re is 1 plus 1 plus 3, so it's 4. Here decay is, here is that there's a hybrid joint, so like an internal hinge. So m dash is 2 because two members are meeting, AB and BC. So my RR is 1, so I add RR to my this equation. This is another hybrid joint. So again RR is 1, 2 minus 1. সেটাই This support reaction, it is a fixed reaction, so there are three unknowns from here, two from here, and again two from here, because two support reactions here. One is the y direction translation is restrained, and the rotation is also restrained if there are three wheels. In a normal roller, there are two wheels, so rotation is free. So that's how we calculate the number of reactions here. This is a similar kind of problem. Now we move on to the topic of today, that is stiffness matrix. So the first question is, what is stiffness? Stiffness is the ability of a structure or material to limit deformation subject to an action. On a stress strain diagram, it is represented as the slope. Stiffness is most pertinent to the serviceability of a structure, such as deflection, cracking, and vibration. So we have seen stress strain curves. You would have seen stress strain curve of concrete or steel by now. It varies, like it does. It's not a straight line. In an ideal case, it is a straight line that stress is proportional to strain. Where if the material follows Hooke's law, it's a linear elastic material. Then the stress divided by that the slope of the curve is the stiffness. But even when the slope varies and when the diagram is a varying one, the slope at any particular point, the tangent will vary, but at any particular point, the slope will be the stiffness. And as what is serviceability criteria, we know that there are two kinds of criteria that our design has to satisfy. One is the collapse or ultimate limit states, which has to do with the ultimate failure of a structure, and serviceability criteria are the other ones, which basically have give us stipulations about maximum deflection, displacement, or rotation in various parts of a structure. So it might say that the deflection at the midpoint of a beam should not exceed 5 millimeter. So those are my serviceability criteria. They are called serviceability because from the English word service, it means that the basically serving the purpose of a structure. For that we need serviceability criteria. So it can be that a beam deflects extremely much. It looks very unsafe, and it has not yet collapsed. So basically my building is still standing. But if it's in a residential building, if you see a beam is hanging like this, you will not feel safe and you will call for a repair. So that is where or the purpose of the structure is not being met. So that's why these limits are placed. It's a feeling of unsafe, that is one. Then there are other cases, it might be in a factory. Suppose you have to move some equipment from one room to the other. So if there is some excessive deformation on the lintel beam of the door, it might hinder the movement of my instruments. So that is also not serving the purpose. So that's why we need serviceability criteria as well as the ultimate collapse criterions. And since stiffness is the ability to limit deformation subject to an action, this is relevant for the serviceability of a structure. While stress is more related to the collapse limit states, stiffness and displacements are related to the serviceability limit states. This is the stiffness of a spring, which we have learned in class 11 and 12, that spring, when suppose I put a force F and it deflects delta D, that deflects a distance delta, and then comes to equilibrium, then my stiffness is F by delta. We know that stiffness is the force per unit displacement in very simple terms. And the stiffness matrix is a key concept in structural engineering that quantifies how a structure deforms under load. It is basically the connection between load and deformation. So far, what we have done so far, when we have studied the BMD, SFD, or method of sections, method of joints, we have seen how the forces and stresses are developed in my members, in my structures. And then we moved on to unit load method, or method of consistent deformations, or the elastic curve method, moment area method, conjugate beam method. What we were doing, we were we doing there, we were finding out the displacements. But stiffness is the property that connects these two, that is the force or stress response and the strain or displacement response. So now stiffness matrix is a square matrix that represents the interrelation of forces at the nodes, defining the rigidity of a structural element in relation to its displacement. It's a rigidity basically, if you want to visualize it. So there are some properties of stiffness matrix. Order of stiffness matrix correspond to total DOS. DOS is degrees of freedom. Singular stiffness matrix means that a structure is unconstrained and rigid, and it is under rigid body motion. Singular means in a matrix, singularity means when the determinant is zero. Each column of the stiffness matrix is an equilibrium set of nodal force required to produce unit respective to degree of freedom. Symmetric stiffness matrix shows that force is directly proportional to displacement, which is what we will be encountering in this course. Diagonal terms of the matrix are always positive. That is, force directed in say left direction cannot produce a displacement in right direction, and diagonal terms will be zero or negative only if the structure is unstable. Procedure of analysis using stiffness matrix method. Find it step by step. So this is basically these steps are the algorithms that are the basics of the algorithms that are used in most analysis software. So stiffness matrix method is the previous step to finite element method, and software like Abacus, ANSYS, which are used for higher like research level structural analysis, are all based on the finite element method. So a concept of the stiffness matrix method, though not really important for exams right now, is important for a future if you want to study civil engineering in the future, or get into research or something. So step one is we determine the degree of kinematic indeterminacy, neglecting axial deformations. We identify independent joint displacement delta 1, delta 2 up to delta n. Suppose there are total n degree of kinematic indeterminacy. Step 2 is we assign one coordinate in the direction of each unknown displacement of joint. We develop stiffness matrix and find the inverse of matrix. Then step 3 is we remove the displacements in the direction of coordinates and obtain the locked structure. Locked means it's a stable structure. Since find the forces developed in the direction of assigned coordinates due to the given loading in the locked structure. Let P1L, P2L up to Pnl are forces developed in the direction of coordinate. Then displacement delta 1, delta 2 up to delta n will be, it is the inverse of the K matrix into minus PL. So this is my displacement matrix, this is my inverse of my stiffness matrix, and this is my force vector. So sorry, displacement vector, force vector, and stiffness matrix, they have to be compatible. We know that for matrix multiplication they have to be compatible. So this is a square matrix n by n. This will be n cross 1, and this also will be n cross 1. So n rows, 1 column, and the stiffness matrix will be n cross n, and n is the degree of kinematic indeterminacy. Now let us look at the examples. Using stiffness matrix method, analyze the following beam, find final moment, and also draw bending moment diagram. So this is a continuous beam. This has one roller support, and one fixed support here. So J is 3. There are 3 joints. And the number of reactions is, there is RA in upward direction, like in vertical direction, RB in vertical direction, and RC in vertical direction, horizontal direction, and there will be one moment. So 3 here, 1 here, 1 here. So RE is 5, and the number of actually rigid members are 2. So M dot double dash is 2. So DK is 3 into 3 minus 5 minus 2, that is 2. Now I'm going to take theta A and theta B. These two are so rotation is available here, rotation is available here. Apart from that, all my kinematic freedom is fixed. So theta A, theta B. Take theta A and theta B as unknown displacement. Assign coordinate 1 in the direction of theta A and coordinate 2 in the direction of theta B. For stiffness matrix, the first column, give unit displacement in direction of the coordinate. So theta A is 1, and ensure theta B is 0. So I fix it because already the y direction displacement was fixed, and now that I restrain the rotation as well, give a fixed support. So K11, as we know from slope deflection method, is 4 EI by 3, and K21 is 2 EI by 3. For column 2, I'm going to give unit displacement in the direction of coordinate 2. So I am giving a unit rotation here, and I'm going to fix A because theta A has to be 0. So again, using the same concept, K12 is 2 EI by 3, and K22 is 4 EI by 3 plus 4 EI by 4, because this side and this side both I have to consider. So this I get 7 EI by 3, and the stiffness matrix for selected coordinate will be 4 EI by 3, 2 EI by 3, 2 EI by 3, 7 EI by 3. So this term, this term, this term, and this term. in matrix I know K11, K12, K21, K22, K21, like that we write. Sorry, K11, K12, K21, K22. So 1, 1 and 2, 2 are my diagonal members, and the other two are the off diagonal members. So we see that these two are equal because this is a, we saw that stiffness matrix is symmetric. The symmetric stiffness matrix shows that force is directly proportional to displacement. That is a assumption we are doing here. So we will in all examples we encounter here, it will be symmetric over the diagonal. So this is EI 4227. ক্লাসমেট থেকে পড়াশোনা করে কোনো দরকার নেই তো। So the inverse of the stiffness matrix here is 1 by 8 Ti 7 minus 2 minus 2 4. It's just matrix inversion that we have studied, and a basic knowledge of linear algebra is needed for this topic of this course. Let P1L and P2L be the forces or moments developed in the coordinate direction due to the given load in the locked structure. So I want to find out the effective or net uh, equivalent moment developed in A and B. So MAB bar is the fixed end moment that we have studied for again for slope deflection method, minus 10 into 3 by 8, that is minus 3.75, and MBA bar is minus 6 into 4 square by 12 minus 8. Sorry, MBA bar will be the same as MAB, opposite sign, and MBC and MCB will be minus 6 into 4 square by 12 and 6 into 4 square by 12. P1L is MAB, P2L is MAB minus MBC because both contributions from this side and that side, and P2L is these two. So this is basically a row vector, like a column vector I want. So these two I put here. So delta 1 is this 1 by 8 I'm basically solving this equation. Okay, so this is 7 into this minus 2 into this, and 1 by 8 is outside. So I get delta 1, then I get delta 2. This is minus 2 into this, 4 plus 4 into this. So I get delta 2. So the final end moments here, from slope deflection method again we note these equations that the MAB is MAB bar plus 2EI by L, this equation. So theta A theta B I know now, I put that, and this delta is 0 because there is no settlement. So from that I get MAB and MBA. So MBC, MCB, everything I've got. So now, similar to how we did in slope deflection method, we draw a superposition diagram kind of thing. So this is for the loading. So there was a point load here. So this is and there was a uniform distributed load here. So this is a parabola. This is a 2-degree curve, and these fixed end moments we just join by straight lines. And the overall bending moment diagram will be a linear superposition of both of these. So now let us look at another example. We analyze the frame. This is a frame. The previous question was a beam. This is a frame. J here is 3 because there are 3 joints. RE is 5, 3 from this fixed support and 2 from this hinge support, and M dash dash is 2 because they are actually rigid. In the rules it was written that we have to consider all the members are as actually rigid. It is part of this methodology. So my degree of kinematic indeterminacy is again 2, 3 into 3 minus 5 minus 2. So theta B and theta C are my unknowns. This is a rotation here and a rotation here. So theta A and theta B and theta C are my unknown displacement. I call theta B as my coordinate 1 and theta C, yes, and theta C as my coordinate 2. So the stiffness matrix, column 1 will be, we give the unit displacement in direction of coordinate 1. So theta B is 1 and theta C is 0. So K11 is 4EI by 5 plus 4E into 2I by 4 because the I is here, the moment of inertia is I, and here the moment of inertia is 2I. I is a constant. So this just says that this is doubly the moment of inertia is of this BC member. The beam is double layer of the column. So we add K2, we have to add because it's a contribution from both members. For K21 is 2 into E into 2I by 4. For second column, I'm going to give unit displacement in C, and I'm going to fix this B. So theta C is 1 and theta B is 0. So K12 is K21, as we know it will be symmetric, and K22 is 4E into 2I by 4. So I get the stiffness matrix as 14 by 5 EI. This term was 14 by 5 EI, then EI, then again EI here, and this diagonal term is 2 EI. So let P1L and P, now I've got the stiffness matrix. I can get the inverse. This is just a mathematical operation. But let P1L and P2L be the forces or moments developed in the coordinate directions. Here it's moment because here my degree of both my degrees of freedom are rotation, right? So here I want my P1L and P2L will be moments. So they are developed in the coordinate directions due to the given loading in loft structure. MAB bar is minus, since this is a point load not at the midpoint. The formula we have studied is PAB square by L square, and this will be PBA square by L square. So this is minus, this is plus. Here we get two values, MAB bar and MDA bar, which are the fixed end moments. And for UDL, we know that the formula is WL square by 12. So MBC bar is minus WL square by 12, and MCB bar is plus WL square by 12. So P1L is MBA bar minus MBC bar. P1L is this. P2L is just MCB bar. So now I have my equation as delta 1, delta 2. This is my displacement vector. Is inverse of K matrix into P1L minus P1L minus P2L. And now we solve this delta 1 and delta 2. This is just a directly linear equation that we just do a matrix multiplication to solve theta 1 and theta 2. We have solved them. So now theta 1 and delta 1 and delta 2, that is theta b and theta c respectively. And my final end moments, we know the formula. MAB is MAB bar plus 2 EI by LAB into 2 theta A plus theta B minus 3 delta by L. Delta is 0 here. So we get this. Similarly, we get MBA, MBC and MCB. Yeah. So from that, we all have all the fixed end moments. So if you want to draw the bending moment diagram, we are going to go for a linear superposition. This is a similar example. It has four members and only one. So okay, so there are degrees of freedom. Here will be rotation at O and rotation at A. So from that, we follow the exact same method. We have theta O and theta A as my unknowns. So I follow the same method. I find the stiffness matrix, I find the displacements here, and then I define the final fixed end moments as this. So okay. So this with this we come to the end of the course. Stiffness matrix method was the last topic, and we have already had a recap of this course in the last Thursday. So thank you for attending the course. I'll wait for a few minutes.
Six is going to get that right setup, sort of place when they get to tonight.